So, my beginning of my awakening journey began in the later part of 2012. I was working the 9 to 5 routine, and I was in an office, and I was a trainee CAD technician, a job I'd got after 2 years studying mechanical engineering at college. And I never really gave too much thought about this career path that I had chosen. It all fell into place quite nicely, and everyone else has done the college, or they've got a job, or they're all following this path, so I just went along and did the same. And I was there for about a year and a half before I realized this is really not for me. However, during my time there, a process was initiated, and I began my interest in the government banking systems and just the environmental stuff going on all over the world, and specifically in England. And I started to question, where does my tax go? Because one of every 5 days is gone before I even see my paycheck. So I started to do some serious research into the national debt, and how every year the interest on this debt is ever increased, and it's quite a lot. In England, it's about £60 billion or something, yeah, around that number. It's just quite a lot of money, and I followed that up and saw where that went and how it was not going on the services that it's supposed to be going towards. And so that was just one big major thing for me, and I was like, well, this is bullshit. Why am I doing this? Um, so that was good in one sense because it broke away my trust in the government and the banking systems and the general consensus reality of the 9 to 5 work working lifestyle. So that was good. But then it's over time I sort of was, how can I break away from this system? And I started to develop a way that I could, although it wasn't the most smartest move that I've ever done, I must say. I will get onto that shortly. But what happened during my time at Trinity House was I went through you could say, the romantic rebellious phase, where I discovered all these things, 9/11 and all that, and I was trying to tell everyone who was within my reach, every family member, friends, even sometimes just random people I would meet. Everyone had to hear about my newfound discoveries, and I was very unrelentless and um, argumentative with anyone who had a different opinion to what I had just discovered. I remember very specifically once I was out with my dad and my sister, and we went for a meal. And me and my dad ended up having what began as a discussion, then turned into an argument about, I think it was 9/11. And the whole dinner got completely ruined. There was no progress made either way. It was just a complete waste of time. And that's just one example of how this romantic rebellious phase was quite destructive some ways. There was, of course, some people who benefited greatly from hearing my opinion, but they should have been my sole focus, not everyone, and people who are not even programmed to have any form of an awakening to this stuff in their lifetime. That was a bit of an infringement on free will. However, that's a process I believe many people go through. There's a great saying that the truth will set you free, but first it will piss you off, and I can definitely relate to that. And also, it was the beginning of 2013 where I began my Facebook page, Learn How to Think. And I attributed quite a bit of the knowledge that I'd got through Facebook pages, people sharing stuff about things they care about, and offering a different perspective to the mainstream news, which so many people get their opinion on the world, including me. I used to do that. I used to read the mainstream websites, the news outlets, and so I sort of thought to myself, if it wasn't for those people who had put the effort into creating this page and sharing this information, I never would have come to the understandings that I do now. So I was grateful for that. So I decided that I'd like to be a part of that. And yeah, January 2013, Learn How to Think was born, and it done really well. It began just with friends, people I knew. Um, I would just mention my page, and then they may mention it to someone else or share something I shared, and it yeah, built up momentum quite fast, and it gave me an outlet to share some of the things I was researching and experiencing. So I've become quite successful over the course of 2013. I'm not sure exactly when it reached 50,000 likes, but it got to its peak, and it may well have been within a year. Unfortunately, in the beginning of 2014, that's when my journey changed dramatically, and I had decided I was going to quit my job, and basically I thought I could make a living through selling drugs. And of course, at the time, it seemed like such a good idea, but looking back, it was a very, very stupid idea. Anyway, so that started a process where unfortunately, I was robbed and I lost a lot of money, and I ended up getting kicked out of my home. And so within 2 months, I become jobless and homeless and basically broke. And so that began a terribly dark part of my life. And I got quite heavily into drugs, namely ecstasy and weed were my two major ones, but also alcohol. We'd been smoking tobacco for quite a while, but it become any way to escape from reality, which I could get my hands on really. And so this process of moving, like couch surfing through friends, and that not working out, and then still trying to survive through selling drugs because I couldn't go on the benefit because I quit my job and I was honest about that. If I'd have lied and said that I'd got fired, I could have got the benefit, but hey, that's how it seems to roll with that stuff. So skipping forward about 6 or 7 months, I'd come through the worst of it, and I'd had a lot of stuff happen, and I believe this is part of my own choices, of course, but also the Matrix in trying to set me up for self-destruction. They could giving the accounts that they could see with the hyperdimensional aspect of it all, see probable futures and recognize that I would be a threat to the Matrix itself. And so reality was being orchestrated to have me self-destruct. And I'm forever grateful for my friends who helped me through this dark path. If it wasn't for them and a strong internal desire to change, I wouldn't have made it through that. No way. So we skip forward to the end of 2014, and I was back at my parents' place, and I'd gotten through the worst of it in terms of my drug addiction. Although the ecstasy wasn't such a thing anymore, and I'd stopped selling drugs by that point. I think I'd gone back onto the benefit, and um, then begun 2015, and I managed to get a job, but then lost that quite fast, which was a bit disheartening. And then I was still sort of going through a process, and I picked up qigong along the way. Actually, that was a very useful thing to come across. It's an interesting story how I came across this amazing art form, and I was down the beach with my friend, and we were having a conversation, just chatting away, and there happened to be this woman just appear about 15 feet to our right, and just sat down and started meditating. And I was very surprised because in my hometown I didn't know anyone did this kind of stuff. And so to cut the story short, a couple of days after that I went round to her house, and she introduced me to Qigong with her partner, and they showed me the basic moves, and straight away I had a very strong resonance with this. And I was very happy to meet these people, and Qigong in many ways helped me get through my addictions. Although it wasn't the sole answer to everything, it very much helped. So unfortunately, because of that dark part of my life, I had to stop the page almost entirely, so that lost a lot of its momentum. I kept it going a little bit, but that sort of thing really has to be constantly monitored and updated. And so I had my Qigong, and I did a little bit of meditation, but wasn't any specific sort of technique, just sort of here and there, not really focused and every day, and just more for relaxing and stress relief than to get control of my mind, for example. So again, about halfway through 2015, I unfortunately got kicked out again due to some mainly. I have to admit, a lot of this was my fault. I was still into smoking weed and tobacco and all this stuff, and it wasn't a very good environment for to have me around. Basically, I still, yeah, it wasn't beneficial to the household, that's for sure. And so I actually had to spend a month in a tent, which was interesting experience to do that. That was one of my low points, but still it wasn't so bad compared to the year I just had. And I was getting by. Again, the charity of my friends was tremendous in this. And then I did my first ever Help X experience at a farm, and that was pretty cool. I had um, never experienced living on a farm like this before, and that was really good. That took me away from everything, and when I come back, my friend had offered me to stay at his flat, and that was great. Admittedly, I was living basically in a closet. That was my bedroom, but it was much better than a tent. And so throughout all of this, I had, always kept my interest in researching um, like spirituality and the Matrix and all this stuff. Although, of course, it did take a bit of a back seat during this dark night of the soul that I went through. But coming through all of that, I managed to get a job again. Well, it wasn't a very good job. It was enough to keep me going, and I managed to save up a little bit of money, and with the help of my dad as well, I got the funds together to come to Australia, and that was the best decision of my life because I had some serious questions about the world and myself that really needed to be answered, and I really had to break out of this addictive pattern that I was in and the self-destructive pattern that it was still wasn't very good in my life. So I come to Australia, and it was an interesting way to do my journey. I know some people, they have everything planned and they're like, I'm going to be at this place at this time for this long and all this stuff. But for me, I flew into the Gold Coast, and I saw these beautiful trees and hills and mountains, and I was very surprised. I didn't expect that at all. And I was like, that's where I'm going. That's where I have to be. And I landed in Australia, and it was bloody hot there, but it was nice. And I spent some time at some hostels. And that was good fun. Just so overwhelming, the whole experience of being the other side of the world, and a bit of partying, a little bit, not too much. And actually, I remember the first night I got to Australia, I had went out with a couple of Swedish people who were at the hostel. We went to the beach, and there was this beautiful storm out at sea. You could just see these cracks of lightning far off in the distance. It was amazing. Such a nice introduction to Australia. And so after a week, I had a Helpex that was right in the heart of Numinbah Valley, right in the heart of all these bushes and trees and mountains that I saw on the plane. And that was a great, great experience. It was a beautiful farm. I actually was incredibly lucky because after about 3 or 4 days of being at the farm, there's one of the Australian man who works there. He sort of popped his head round the door, and it's like, "Hey, do any of you guys want to come and find some mushrooms?" I'm like, "Oh, yeah, of course, yeah, for sure." And yeah, we managed to find quite a few. They were mainly the ones that you really want are the gold tops, but there wasn't so many of those. But we found the blue meanies, and had the most incredible time on this mushroom trip. And the other guys, they made a tea, but I just ate mine as they were. And yeah, it took me about an hour and a half before I felt any of the effects, but they were already laughing away at 20 minutes. But yeah, it was an incredible night, so powerful, and the connection to like the surroundings and my heart and the music. It was just so amazing, you know. I just come to the other side of the world, and the mushrooms just happened to find me. It's truly a beautiful experience. So skipping ahead a little bit, I jumped from Helpex to Helpex. Sort of, I'd restarted a bit more of my research into various matters. Got my first interest in nutrition, and it was very interesting to see how all these different Australian people lived. It's quite a different lifestyle out there compared to England. And so that was great. And then I came to Crystal Grid, which is a Helpex, or a business, should I say, that has a Helpex, setting up parties. And this was great fun, although I sort of backtrack a little bit because I had starting to become a bit cleaner in my habits and all of that. But when I got to this place, it all sort of went out the window again, and thus begun the 3 months of setting up parties and partying, and that was great fun, I must admit. But one of the real interesting points of that Helpex is an LSD experience. So one of the guys there decided he was going to buy half a bottle of liquid LSD and try and sell it at a festival. We thought we'd try it out though, of course, to see what it's like. And so there was 5 of us, and we each took, no, 6 including me, and we each took a drop. And then we lit a fire, and we're sitting around the fire, kind of like at an airport, waiting to take off. And we were sort of looking at each other like, oh, is it going to kick in? Da, da, da. And then all of us, apart from the oldest member of the group, we decided to go for a walk and try and find the passion fruit vines, which are about a 5-minute walk away from where we were living. And where we were living was pretty cool. Like I say, it was a Helpex, but it had its own land for the helpers, so we were left to our own devices. That was really cool. You know, with like a kitchen and a communal area and our own living quarters. So anyway, we go for a walk, and of course it's pitch black, and instantly we get lost, and you just look up at the sky, and it's like, you know, the LSD must have started to kick in by this point, because it was the most magnificent starry sky I'd ever seen. You sort of look up at the stars and you start walking. It's like you're walking on a carpet of stars. However, you'd look back down and you'd be like, where the fuck am I? Like, I have no idea where I am. But of course we were howling away of laughter, and maybe about an hour we got to these passion fruit vines and made our way back. And then when we got back, the oldest member of the group that I mentioned who stayed behind, he was quite a seasoned tripper. And everything became a lot more serious very fast when we come back. And we sat around the fire again and started getting way more deeper into our psyche and consciousness and all of this stuff. And skip ahead again about 3 hours, one member of the group sort of got in a negative feedback loop, and he was just in this destructive mind, and nothing we could do about it really. No one could have helped him other than himself, but him and his girlfriend, they went inside. She was trying to help him out, and so then it was just us. The rest of us would have left outside, and we were talking around by the fire, and it was only men now, so we were talking about sort of some manly sort of stuff, sharing a few things. And I don't know exactly how this happened, although I've had many psychedelic experiences, and from what I can gather, I know what's real and what's not real, what's a trip and what is not. And so what happened is somehow this space opened up, and we were communicating telepathically. And at first, of course, we're looking at each other like, is this real? You know, no one's actually talking with their mouse at this point, but we're like, is this possible? Is this really, are we just tripping? Like, nah, this is actually. And then there was a point where they cracked a joke, and all 3 of us laughed at exactly the same time. And it was at that moment that my mind almost exploded, because that was that was solidified proof that we really were having a telepathic communication session right there. There was no doubt about it. I remember standing up, just like holding my head like that actually really happened. Was that like the first telepathic joke ever? And yeah, it's pretty incredible. So after I calmed down a little bit, we again begin to communicate telepathically, and it sort of jumped into this communication, which it's hard to put into words, because what was happening is we was exchanging huge amounts of information about ourselves to the others instantly. And instantly I knew everything about, say, one of my friend's dad and all of his dads, and it was, yeah, it's huge packages of information. I don't know even what you'd call that, like super telepathy, I'm not sure. So that was definitely the highlight of that experience, and is quite truly amazing when you think about it, that the human has this potential to have these psychic abilities. And I truly believe that psychedelics just temporarily unlock pathways in your brain and consciousness that could otherwise be opened perhaps through training and dedication. So I truly believe that it's possible for humans to be able to communicate telepathically, amongst other psychic phenomena. And there are many wise men who have talked about this, and believe it's something that wouldn't come too easily, and you'd have to be trained, unless you are one of the chosen few who's just born maybe with an extra bit of energy or an energy circuit somewhere that's just naturally opened, and then you have clairvoyant abilities from birth. I do believe that's a thing, but it's quite rare. Anyway, so after that amazing experience, that was probably the highlight of the whole time at this Helpex, and so I left, and it's quite funny actually. I went from a very intense party atmosphere to another Helpex where it was a family farm, and they were Christian, and this was like the biggest switch over from living style that I've experienced. It was very different, but it was also very nice. They were beautiful people, and I felt very at home there. So again, skipping forward about 4 or 5 months, I had managed to break free from my tobacco addiction and alcohol addiction, which was really, really cool to do that. And I had another Helpex where I was in the middle of the Australian bush, and these people had this sort of like a hotel, but slightly different, a bit more of a bush hotel, with like really fancy tents and that. And they went away on holiday, and they left me alone for about a week at first. And this was really interesting because I didn't actually have, like, my phone had broken, or the charger had broken, and the same with my laptop. And so I had no connection to Wi-Fi, no other people around, and nothing but myself and books and notepad to keep myself occupied. And this was great. It was quite dark in parts because I sort of was clearing all this old stuff that I built up, all this emotional trauma and all this stuff that just came through. And that was a very interesting experience. And again, they went away for 9 days, and I repeated that, but I also managed to find some mushrooms because there was crazy storms. There was like nearly a week of storms when they went away, and storms in Australia are pretty ferocious sometimes. And so I could just remember I was sitting in my little cabin, and I'd set out some pots to collect the water, and I was just sitting in my cabin, this crazy storm going off, and I'm just watching my pots fill up with water, and like, man, this is so cool. But yeah, then a few days after that, it cleared, and I was like, there's got to be a cow field around here with some mushrooms on it. I just, surely. And so I managed to find some, and then again, I have another amazing mushroom experience. Nothing too transcendental, but still, again, to be alone in the middle of the bush with the mushrooms was a truly awesome experience. I remember at one point I was with a candle in a room, and I was convinced I could move this candle's flame with my mind, but I'm not sure about if that actually happened on that one. So it wasn't too long after that that I found my first entry into some of the deeper esoteric material that is available on the internet. It's interesting how it found me, actually. I had a Facebook page, not my main one, not Learn How to Think, but another one. And a guy had messaged me asking to help out with that. And I was like, of course, sure. He seemed he was older than me, seemed quite wise, and that was nice to have him on board. So I had him on my personal page, and then he ends up sharing a post from a man called Bernhard Gumpfer, and that instantly, as soon as I started to read some of the stuff that he posted, I was like, yeah, that's what I've been looking for, you know, because so much of spirituality on the website is just fluffy bullshit that hasn't got real depth, and it's like 10 signs you may be experiencing a spiritual awakening, but those same 10 signs might also be related to mercury poisoning, but nobody mentions that. So I was very, very happy to have found some really deep information, and that was sort of an initiation into some of the deeper parts of esotericism, and I was very, very grateful to have that information find me. And I began getting very, very deep into my research at this point. I remember I just, anytime I wasn't working, doing my help X or whatever, I was reading about this stuff and writing, and just, yeah, it was a great moment in my life. And then I finished in Australia, having had the most incredible time and cleared my addictions. I even managed to stop smoking weed by that point. So I was clean, and I was armed with knowledge and experience, and I began my time in New Zealand, which really, really solidified all of the things that were begun in the time in Australia. And it kind of, you can look at Australia as like my initiation into manhood. I definitely came out of that a man, whereas I began as just a boy. That's what it felt like for me anyway. And so in New Zealand, I had booked a Vipassana course, which I've talked about in a previous talk, and the technique itself is so good. I was so happy to get that technique, and I kept on practicing that along with my research, and I was doing my writing as well. I was writing some poems and stuff like that. And then we skipped forward a couple of months, and I had found this place called Caretaker Farm, which is an amazing place in New Zealand that have now spent most of my time there. And it was in about August 2017 that I had my website, learninghowtothink.net, and this proved to be an awesome project, and I was so happy to have it created, as it's sort of the result of well, at that point, 5 years of going through this spiritual journey, and it's condensed now into one website, which I'm very happy with. And then, so we continue going through. We end up getting quite a good job, and everything seems to fall into place quite nicely for me. And I have a great time at this farm, which is a cool farm, and I'm living in a bus. Away from power and running water and all that stuff. Thankfully, the other part of the property has all that stuff, but in my actual living quarters, yeah, it's very close to nature, beautiful surroundings, and I felt like I'd found a home after nearly how many, like 3 or 4 years of being homeless. I found a home, so that was amazing, and really was beneficial for my my state of mind, and to be able to continue to pursue my spiritual work as well as financial work. And I had met some very interesting people. One of them, there was this healer in the area, and she was an amazing healer, and she'd been able to cure people's diseases with doing chakra balancing, which is very, very interesting. I've written about that in my article, Clairvoyance, Healing and New Age Fallacies, on my website. And she had amazing stories, and that really sparked my interest in becoming a healer of sorts, because for a long time I thought I'd be a Qigong teacher. But my confidence has been shaken at that a little bit, but now it's come back full circle. But for a while I was very interested in that, and then in 2018 began my research deeply into nutrition and all the things to do with the physical parts of the body, as well as the energetic parts, and how emotions and pain and trauma can cause illnesses, and how to clear that, and all of this sort of stuff. And then I went to the Golden Bay in the South Island of New Zealand, and had again some amazing experiences. I did a HelpX that was without electricity. That was a really, really cool place to be completely away from electricity, not even any phone signal. And there's a few other helpers there, and every night we'd be sitting by the fire sharing stories, and there's no one looking at their phone or anything. It's just sharing, back to the human stuff. Not even a light at night, which is interesting. The first couple of days, actually, I had stuff that needed to be in a fridge, and I was like, oh man, I didn't actually know there was going to be no electricity, and I was like, wow, what is this? No Wi-Fi. No, I can't charge my laptop, but after a while I got used to it, and that's actually really cool. But one of the most uh, life-changing events that happened there was the Amanita Muscaria experiences, which I've talked about, but they happened at this place, and they truly, again, shook my view on the world and what could possibly happen when we die and all this stuff. So that was a really amazing experience. And then I spent my last time in Golden Bay there, come back to, again, the North Island, come back to my old job, back to Caretaker Farm, and everything just sort of is become deeper in a way. It's like life itself has just become deeper. I'm constantly progressing on my journey. I'm now in a meditation and qigong routine, and I have now got an album which I'm in the process of recording, which is truly amazing. It's like now that I skip forward to where I am now, and it's like after nearly 3 years of being away, I have completely changed as a person. For starts, I have a lot longer hair now and I have a beard. It's a bit of a shock for some of my friends and family, that's for sure, but it's like the questions about the world. I've gotten so many answers to the questions about myself. I've gotten so many answers, and I feel I really utilized my time away efficiently. Because, when you're doing the HelpX, you have like 10 hours of every day free to yourself. So you can use that incredibly efficiently, and I believe I have. And so now I have a path in my life that I can take, and involving doing stuff I really enjoy and that can also help people at the same time. So that's just amazing. So I've found these things I'm really passionate about, really enjoy doing. So who knows where the rest of my journey will take me, but up until this point it's been incredible. If you had asked me 5 years ago, what do you think your next 5 years are going to be like, I could have never ever told you it would be the way it went. So maybe the next 5 years will be just as surprising, who knows. But for sure it's an incredibly exciting time to be alive, to be on this planet right now, given the current changes that humanity is going through and the earth is going through. Of course, there's going to be some huge change that may initially be negative in the fact that there could be serious chaos and the earth going nuts, but there's many possibilities. But I'm still extremely positive for the future, and especially for those who you say could be the positively spiritually alive people. We're going to have a truly amazing time on this planet. So that's a whole nother talk in itself, what's going to happen to humanity and the planet. But just around my brief summary of my spiritual journey, I'd say I begun the initial awakening, then I had my dark night of the soul, then I had almost like a rebirth, and then I found my passions and my pathways in life, clearing all of the old stuff. And for sure it's not over, and very excited to see where the next part of my life will take me.